The German philosopher Hegel once said, "We do not need to be shoemakers to know if our shoes fit, and just as little have we any need to be professionals to acquire knowledge of matters of universal interest." Characteristically, a relatively large proportion of middle-power foreign policy has a scope that extends beyond the immediacy of geography and direct self-interest. However, middle-power self-interest can be located at a deeper and more dispersed level. That is, an interest in global stability, controllability, and predictability. Welcome to the panel, Middle Powers in the New World Order.
Great way to set the spirit for this conversation on middle powers in the New World Order. It's truly an honor to be moderating this relevant discussion. And why is it relevant? It's because of the evolving global landscape. I think we are witnessing a period where overlapping crises, from geopolitical tensions to economic instability, these are all reshaping our international order. The world faces over 100 armed conflicts as we speak, and these conflicts are fueled not only by traditional disputes, but also by geopolitical polarization and the rise of non-state actors. Power asymmetries and geopolitical divides are preventing us from coming together around global solutions at a time when cooperation is more needed than ever. So it is, amidst this complexity, the role of the middle powers have never been more critical. While the resurgence of great power politics has dominated headlines these past few weeks, it is truly the middle powers that pull on diplomatic levers behind the scenes. And we have seen it happen in the past weeks and throughout history, I would say. Middle powers often serve as stabilizers in global politics, as advocating for multilateral solutions, for conflict resolutions, for cooperative approaches to pressing challenges. So I think that the global order, and that's the title of our forum this year, is being reshaped, fundamentally altering the landscape dominated by traditional organizations. The rise, for example, of the BRICS, of CTPP, of Mercosur, of CELAC, ASEAN, demonstrates how emerging powers are relying on tailored institutions that serve their national and regional interests. So middle powers are uniquely positioned to provide alternative views and approaches to global governance. These countries have indeed, and you represent these countries here, have the potential to reassert, redefine, reshape global governance and multilateralism. That's why the conversation today will explore the strategies, the constraints, the opportunities that define the role of these middle powers in the 21st century. We will examine how they navigate relations with the great powers, how they sustained regional stability, how they enhance economic resilience and address transnational challenges such as climate change, technology governance, and conflict mediation. So we have 9 speakers. I would just ask you to be extremely short, 3-5 minutes, because we have 45 minutes together for 9 speakers. And I will start with the great Benita Ferrero-Waldner. I would give her first the floor, and I would ask you one question, Benita. Today, many of the multilateral institutions face increasing criticism about their legitimacy, about their effectiveness. So drawing on your experience as foreign minister, as commissioner of the European Union, how can middle powers help rebuild trust in global governance? The floor, you have the floor, Benita.
Well, thank you very much, dear moderator, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Indeed, I think middle powers, as you rightly said, even if they are not superpowers, they do possess a significant regional influence and also strategic importance. They are characterized by their strategic pursuit of autonomy, but also willing to engage in multi-alignment, balancing relations with various major powers, rather than aligning only with one camp. So this enables them to influence international negotiations, to contribute to the reform of global governance structures, and also to serve as vital partners. So in a moment where we have a polling crisis and an international multipolarity, they can indeed, I think, rebuild trust in global governments. Let me make 4 brief points. Middle powers, they can champion international law, multilateral and global government reform, and thus counterbalancing unilateral actions by great powers. By, and that's the first thing, taking leadership. Leadership roles in institutions, like for instance, in the United Nations, in the WTO, in other specialized organizations, or in climate initiatives. In any case, they can shape global norms in that way. Second point, by creating coalitions, by aligning and cooperating in a flexible, interest-based approval to foreign policy. They should build coalitions with either different powers on specific issues while maintaining their overall strategic autonomy. They could engage, for instance, with broad states, including other middle powers, of course, avoiding excessive dependence on one major power, and also build coalitions that can collectively then influence global governance, and also could strengthen ties with emerging countries and alternative institutions, the BRICS, for instance, or the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or the African Union. And thus, they could, I think, create new avenues for economic and security cooperation, and also, of course, making regional partnerships. I mean, the European Union is, for me, a middle power, a big middle power, but also ASEAN, African Union, and they can and we can indeed provide collective beginning power and bargaining power, and thus bringing about a result-orientated outcome. Third point, what can we do? I think, and this is what also the Bulgarian foreign minister said, we can support a rules-based order by promoting shared common values such as peace, stability, human rights, human security, multilateralism, and of course also we try to do a lot on conflict prevention. And the more middle powers are coming together, the better. And finally, and fourth point, I would say, if middle powers are becoming hosts to conferences, like indeed, it's not a power, but it's a very important institution, Islamic Al-Jawi, they can promote initiatives, they can mediate in great power disputes, and they can mediate in challenging global questions. So then they not only reinforce their diplomatic credibility, but they can rebuild trust. And rebuilding trust means that in the end, we can have a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benita. Your 4 points were extremely powerful. I think that they frame very, nicely the conversation that we are having. Of course, I will not repeat the 4 points. I think everybody heard them, and they are very, to the point, extremely important in the shaping of this multipolar order, and also in addressing the polycrisis that you mentioned. So thank you. Let me now turn to our second speaker, Mr. Elnur Mammadov, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all the guests. I think, first of all, as a representative of the host state, I would like to extend once again my warm welcome to all the distinguished panelists and the audience, the members of the audience, the guests that are visiting Azerbaijan, taking their precious time to be part of this Nizami Forum, which has turned into a very good tradition over years. Second, thank you for bringing up this issue, because I think, especially now in a changing world where a lot of old traditions and rules are being destroyed as we speak. And many experts argue that now we are entering in uncharted waters, where we don't have necessarily experience in how to resolve these new crises. The old rules do not necessarily help you on each and every occasion, and you have to come up with the solutions that would be able to not only end up in the adoption of resolutions at the UNG or at the Security Council, but would actually move the things on the ground. And that is one of the things that we've been witnessing as Azerbaijan for many years, suffering from the armed aggression from Armenia, where there were 4 resolutions of the United Nations Security Council that simply didn't move the needle. It didn't change anything on the ground. And we had to take the initiative. We had to liberate our lands based on the rules of international law. Now, coming to the point of middle powers, my first point will be, now in a new emerging world and the world order, the role of middle powers is definitely increasing. You have mentioned a number of international organizations. Now, obviously, as a representative of Azerbaijan, I'll bring a few other examples. We were leading the initiative of creating the Organization of Turkic States back in 2009. And last year, we celebrated the 15-year anniversary of that regional organization, which is becoming stronger year on year and connecting South Caucasus with the countries of Central Asia. Our leadership at the non-aligned movement, which was important to spearhead the efforts of 120 member states. And that is for countries that, like Azerbaijan, which does consider itself as a middle power, was an important platform in order to unite the second largest organization after the United Nations. And the role that the middle powers are playing these days increasingly, in a situation where, as you have just mentioned, there are more crises, unfortunately, more armed conflicts around the world, is to find its niche based on its resources, based on its geostrategic location, based on its active diplomatic initiatives. And once you are finding your niche spot in international relations, you should be able to leverage your positioning as a middle power country. The second point is, I think that was mentioned by His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Bulgaria, just a few minutes ago, is that middle powers and the middle countries, they are interested in multilateralism. Because obviously you're running a very serious risk if you're not part of the... Now many people are using what I find to be a strange phrase of rules-based order. I prefer to use the principles of international law because I don't have a very clear definition of rules-based order, which has emerged in recent years. But if you put all your efforts in promoting the principles enshrined in the UN Charter and in the Helsinki Final Act of 1975, that actually provides for a predictable environment for the middle powers and for the middle-sized countries like Azerbaijan. And of course, you find yourself in a much more comfortable position if you know what the rules of the games are and what to expect from your neighbors, especially from your big neighbors, from the superpowers. And that is a point that I think to be important. And finally, given that you've asked us to be extremely short, it's always a challenge to be extremely short, but the final point I'll make about your ability to make independent decisions and putting your national interests ahead of anything else. In order for you to be able to do that, of course, you have to have the resilient economy. And that's exactly what we built in Azerbaijan over the last 3 decades. Unless you can do that, of course, without having strategic autonomy, without having economic independence, you are not in a position to make decisions for yourselves, the independent decisions that take the interests of your own country into account in the first place. And for that, of course, in order to play this game, to be part of this to be at the table and not be part of the menu, as many people say it, you have to have the resilient economy and your vision for the next year. So having resources, having a geostrategic location in itself, it doesn't guarantee that you would be able to play the role of a mid-power country. What you have to be able to do is to leverage those resources, and only then you can actually have a seat at the table. I promise to be short. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Minister Mammadov. Indeed, middle powers can lead, and we have seen Azerbaijan leading in many fronts, including on the climate front, including on the leadership of the non-aligned movement, and your call for the need to be honest brokers, gaining also economic independence. So you are hands-free to really operate as a neutral, honest broker. I think this is a very, very, very good point. And also the role of middle powers on defending multilateralism and international law. So thank you for your contribution to this conversation, Vice Minister. Let me now turn to the former president of Iceland, His Excellency Olafur Ragnar Grimsson. And the question to you, Excellency, would be, many middle powers are at the forefront of climate diplomacy and sustainable development. We have seen the leadership of your country on these very important issues. So how can middle powers drive the global climate action while balancing their own economic and political constraints? I think your country is a very good example of that. You have the floor, President.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment to my country to call Iceland a middle power. It's a term we would never use about ourselves, and it's worth reminding everybody that when we became a republic in 1944, there were only 110,000 people in Iceland. And it was the first time in history that such a small community became a sovereign state. And for a long time, we were the smallest country in the United Nations. So this kind of leads me to make the point that for us in Europe and in the North Atlantic area, I think it's very important for us to realize how fast and how fundamentally the world is changing. And I was privileged to witness that during my presidency, because when I became president, the Cold War was just recently over. When I finished, Asia had become a dominant force in the world. And to use the classification middle power, although I can understand why it's being used, begs the question, who are the top powers and who are the bottom powers? And if we use the term bottom powers, I think we will see the danger in using the term middle power, because I don't think any country wants to be called the bottom power. And I think these classifications can lead us to miss the fast-changing landscape of our world. In about 20 years, 70 to 80% of the world will live in Asia and Africa. We in Europe and North America are a fast declining minority among the global population. But we keep on talking as if we are the center of the global evolution. We are not, as we can see from various things taking place. And just to illustrate the difficulty in this classification, where do you put India? Is India a top power or is it a middle power? Where do you put Great Britain? I would argue Great Britain is a middle power which thinks it is the top power and takes a number of wrong decisions because it still thinks it is a top power. So I think one of the challenges we face in Europe and the North Atlantic is to find a framework and parameters that help us to understand what I would call the floating mosaic of our present world. It's not a bipolar or multipolar world. It's an ever-changing mosaic of countries. And the 21st century is remarkable in the sense this is the first time in human history where an overwhelming majority of states are small or medium-sized. But we have not yet developed a framework to adjust to the fact that a vast majority of sovereign actors are small and medium-sized countries. And I think we are giving far much importance to the so-called great powers in the world order, especially in dealing with the fundamental challenges of our times. You correctly pointed out that if we look at sustainability and energy transformation, we see that apart from China, the leadership has been primarily provided by small or medium-sized countries, which have proved, including my own, that it's possible to go away from fossil fuel-based economies to renewable energy-based economies within a single generation. 40 years ago, most people argued that was not possible. That was not possible. So I think perhaps the fundamental role in our more democratic global world we live in for small or medium-sized country is to demonstrate what's possible. Demonstrate what's possible. To show people there is an alternative. And if you come to my country, which I encourage all of you to do, you will see that the vast majority of the over 2 million tourists that come to Iceland every year are young, educated people from Asia. Why are they coming to Iceland? Because they see a country which is over 90% clean energy, with fresh water, peace, rule of law, equality, extraordinary nature. For them, it is a utopia. It is a utopia. These are young people from mega cities of 10, 15, 20 million people. They have never been alone in nature. They realize the challenges their countries face, whether they come from China, Japan, Korea, India, and so on. And they come to my small country because they want to convince themselves that an alternative is possible. So instead of talking about the world-based order, which I agree with the minister, I don't really know what it means. I mean, quite frankly, with all due respect to everybody who uses that term. And whenever did the so-called rule-based order exist? Did it exist when the war in Iraq started? Did it exist when sort of Libya was blown out of existence? Give me the exact period where the rule-based order existed. Instead, I think we should talk about some of the major challenges we face as people, as communities, as countries, and how we can together solve them. And I think in that missionary journey, small and medium-sized countries have a very important role because they can demonstrate that an alternative is possible. That is the role that my country wants to seek, not because we want to be important, but because we want to demonstrate that there is another way. And a number of other countries have done that as well. And in that sense, I think we are useful within the international community. But I warn against the terminology of middle powers, top powers, bottom powers, because I don't think it will give us a proper understanding of the ever-changing mosaic of the global community. Thank you.
Mr. President, and I really like the metaphor of the world being an ever-changing mosaic, and also your call to say, what are the metrics? Is it useful, to divide the world in small, medium, and big powers? And at the end of the day, what we should, look at is how to come together to face the common challenges that we face. So I think you are so right. And of course, a powerful country is a country that has done the issues that your country has done with education, with gender equality, with implementing the SDGs. I think it's depending on the eyes you look at countries. It's as you say, it's a very diverse and ever-changing mosaic what we are facing. And your call, we very easy use the new world order, or what is the world order that we're shaping. So thank you, for also bringing this little bit of wake-up calls on things that we take for granted and we continue to repeat. So thank you for that. And if you ask me, your country is a power in many ways and fronts as well. So let me now turn to His Excellency Mladen Ivanic, former president of Bosnia Herzegovina. And basically the question to you, now I'm a little shy to use middle powers, but how can middle powers navigate relations with great powers without being drawn into their rivalries? How can middle powers, or the so-called middle powers, keep their strategic autonomy while still engaging in global and regional decision-making? So you have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you very much. I'm not so sure that I will be so optimistic about the role of the middle power. First, maybe it's more fair to say regional powers than the middle powers. But the problem for these powers to be the key player in the global order is that they are very often in conflict. India, for instance, still not the big power. Pakistan, you cannot say that it's not the middle power. What do they have in common? In some other parts, maybe not similar, but let's think about the common approach of the Turkey and Iran, or Iran and Saudi Arabia. So precondition for the middle power to play the key role to navigate between the big powers is to have a common vision. Unfortunately, I think that it's just the question of the level of the conflicts. Big powers have a big conflicts, middle power a little bit less significant, but still a lot of conflicts and tensions. So the question is, in which direction is modern world going on? Definitely, I think that we have two players which are ready for new Yalta, United States and Russia. This is my part, don't touch, okay, if it's your part, I don't care about your actions there. I think that in the case of the most sensitive story these days, Ukraine, we see that this is becoming reality. So are we really faced with the new Yalta? New sphere of influences? There is a chance, but there is also a chance that it will not go in that direction. That depends on something which can be supported later by the mid powers, and these are the key big players, I believe. One is European Union and another one is China. If European Union, like most successful multilateral institutions in the history of the humankind, would be ready to apply that rules which they develop among themselves on the global level, that could encourage a lot of other players who are not big enough to support that approach. European Union, like example of the complicated structure, multilateral structure, based on compromise additionally, shows that European Union was able to survive a lot of challenges. The question is European Union ready to play that role? It looks that still is not. European Union likes to be additional wagon on the train which is led by the United States. But the United States don't want that anymore. They said we are not so interested in that. So it is a big challenge for the European Union leaders to finally start to create rules which will be applied all over the world. And honestly, I believe that China can be a very positive player in that direction. If these two players just join, approach, let's have a new Yalta, the modern world is really in a very, very difficult situation. There is always outcome. There will be always outcome. But I am not so optimistic that this outcome would be positive. So my strong request, if I may say, is to make a pressure on these two key players to start to work together, because if that could be a chance, then honestly, I believe that majority of, I will not say mid-powers or small powers, the rest of the world will be ready to join and to support that approach. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And you said that you're pessimistic, that you're not as an optimist like the rest of our speakers, but your call for establishing alliances, working together, having a common purpose, defending international law, I think that's exactly why we're here for and what we aim at. And when you said, big powers, big problems, small powers, small problems, yes and no. Just let's think for a moment that after a hurricane in one of the small Caribbean countries, in one day, the country can lose 80% of its GDP in 24 hours. And so this is a big problem for a country. So I think that there is no small problem. I think that we all share the same challenges, and perhaps the call is how is, as one of the speakers mentioned, how is that we get our act together to work and to solve the challenges we face collectively. Collective action, multilateralism, regional integration, perhaps is the way to go. But I'm just moderating the conversation, and now I have the privilege to give the floor to Petar Stoyanov. Petar, you were president of Bulgaria. We just heard your foreign minister speak. And basically, the question to you is, we say we are experiencing many changes in the global landscape. The question to you is, what are these changes concretely, especially looking at the change in leadership in the United States? How do you see the role of the so-called middle powers? What opportunities and challenges for these middle powers or these medium-sized states, let's say, with the current U.S. administration?
Okay. Thank you very much, Maria. Let me start by, for the first time in my life, I don't share the same view with my friend Mladen Ivanic. He believes that the so-called, let's say the so-called middle powers will not play a significant role in the current or in the future world order. Just the opposite. Let me start by conclusion, which is the golden time for the middle powers is coming. Why? Because during the Cold War, most of them had to be part of one of the two camps, led by America or led by the Soviet Union. I remember the movement of the so-called non-alignment. You remember that? It was established in 1964. This movement never succeeded in playing a global role, that's for sure. But now, 35 years after the end of the Cold War, the role of the United States as the only superpower is very strongly challenged. And because of that, I think that the middle powers are going to play a very significant role. Why? Because due to their ability to create shifting coalitions, a role which by definition cannot be played by the so-called great powers. Example, many of the middle powers are members of BRICS, which now includes also Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia, with Turkey, Thailand, and Malaysia applying for membership. Above all, this organization is a tool for ad hoc alliances, a way for members to increase their collective bargaining power within traditional Western-led institutions. It is obvious that there is a very big difference between the non-aligned movement in the past and the BRICS countries today. The non-aligned demonstrated power by banding together. Just the opposite. BRICS members and other multi-aligned countries can profit from using a wide range of formal and informal ties to enhance their individual or collective bargaining power with the United States, China, European Union, and others. Shortly speaking, in a world of deals, which is the world of President Trump, middle powers have plenty of advantages, even when they are considerably smaller and militarily weaker. In the past, great powers used their armies and markets to create spheres of influence, where they could intervene almost without limit. But in today's world of multi-alignment, middle powers can reach agreements with great powers and with one another for different purposes. And believe me, not only on the basis of common values. Example, again, India can negotiate with Japan, and she does it. Australia and the United States for enhanced security. At the same time, she can negotiate with Russia for oil and gas, and at the same time with Singapore for green energy. So, Trump's slogan of America First allows middle powers to follow very successful this model. Middle powers use their economic, only two small remarks, use their economic weight frequently pushing for more liberal and inclusive international economic systems. It will be interesting to see, this is directly to your question, the reactions of the middle powers in light of President Trump's recent decisions to impose higher tariffs. There is another reaction from the middle powers I await with interest. It is well known that they strongly support multilateralism, realizing that it is in their entire interest. They believe that multilateral institutions are crucial, and they actively participate in global organizations, something especially important in the face of recent US actions, such as withdrawing from certain UN institutions, Human Rights Council, for example, and the World Health Organization. And a few words. During the Cold War, the world was divided by ideological boundaries, and geography didn't play a significant role. Former Soviet Union had during that time its allies in Latin America, also Asia, also Africa. I think that today political cooperation is being transferred to the regions with their shared history, shared cultural traditions, and border trade interactions, which create more conditions for understanding and mutual trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. And I wish we had more time because for a follow-up question, but basically what you're saying, Peter, is that it's golden age for middle powers. You basically place the importance of the BRICS plus. Oh, that's me saying that I should wait. We should finish the, well, we still have some time, but the important role of the BRICS, again, the issue of coming together or of regional alignments, of issue-based alignments. It's sort of a variable geometry of alliances and partnerships in a way, and it is precisely your call, basically what you're saying, it is the time for middle powers and new alignments and realignments to happen in the current circumstances. So let me now turn to the former foreign minister of Turkey and former Speaker of the Grand National Assembly, Hikmet Cetin. Basically, the question to you would be precisely on coalition building, on the strengths of middle powers in their ability to form coalitions and alliances to advance shared interests. And we heard, many times the need to strengthen regional integration to come together in a very fragmented geopolitical landscape. So what do you see as the biggest obstacles, but also the opportunities that the current circumstances allow for? You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to Nizami Gencevi International Center for bringing such an impressive configuration of distinguished leaders to discuss the mounting challenges of our chaotic times. And also thank to Roshan and his team, which they try to get our life easy in this country. Climate change, migration, pandemics, economic instability, trade wars, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence are some of the leading issues we face today. And we still need peace in many regions on the world. For example, the lasting peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia is still not there. And Kosovo, still the problem with Serbia, still there. Middle East, always problems. I think the Middle East will be reshaping maybe in the future. We don't know yet. And to address these issues, we need effective global governance. For that, we need collective action and cooperation. Currently, the opposite is the case. President Trump and his untimed American unilateralism have handed a nearly fatal blow to multilateralism and international cooperation. This will probably lead the leaders of the other superpowers to retaliate. The inevitable cause is diminished multilateral capability to resolve current problems and to prevent the emergence of new ones. The example of middle countries, Turkey is one of the good examples. Because if we look at, now let me more specific and explain my stand by looking at my own country. Turkey is a prime example of middle power with strategic autonomy. Its geographical location is as a bridge between Europe, the Middle East, and Eurasia, endows it with a web of this wide geography. As a member of NATO, an observer in BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and other international bodies, Turkey is poised to play a pivotal role in favor of global well-being. The current spate of differences between the US and EU on security issues and over the war in Ukraine highlights the importance of Turkey's strategic importance for Europe. To effectively leverage its role as a middle power, Turkey must pursue what I would like to call conceptual impartiality. This is adopting a balanced, neutral approach toward the given problem with taking sides vis-à-vis the parties of the conflict. Conjugal partiality is akin to medical doctor's treatment of an ailment. A concrete example is the Turkish role in the Ukrainian war. While supporting Ukraine, Turkey maintained its good ties with Russia. Turkey was thus able to reach out to Russia to address some of the fallouts of the armed conflict, accessing and making arrangements for taking Ukrainian grain to the rest of the world was with Russian consent. The US welcomed this deal. This was a unique opportunity, and Turkey made good use of it. However, for Turkey to play the part of a productive middle power, in other cases, it must first put its house in order and develop positive ties with all the countries in the region, including especially Israel. And as I have said before, the war is over in Azerbaijan. Nagorno-Karabakh now is by war. They have taken their again. But there is no lasting peace still between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And as I have said before, in the Balkans, Kosovo and Serbia still have problems. And I think the Middle East will be reshaping in the future. How, we don't know yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency. And thank you also for reminding us, you know, in a very concrete terms, what potential roles of middle powers can be in situations of conflict. And we have seen Turkey deploy its middle power strategic position as a broker and as a bridge builder. And also thank you for your call to the need to strengthen multilateralism and international law. Let me now turn to the former Prime Minister of Malta, Joseph Muscat. And basically, the question to you, Excellency, would be, in this very dynamic, volatile geopolitical scenario, how can global supply chains under strain and economic blocks shifting, how can middle powers shape the future of trade? What role should they play in emerging frameworks like, again, we call on the BRICS and the BRICS Plus and the digital trade agreements? So what is the role of middle powers as we understand better and when we boost global supply chains and economic alignments? You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you very much. I think that the discussions that ensued over the last few months and actually over the past few weeks on supply chains reminded most students of economics on the basics of dependency theory and the theories of Prebisch and Singer on how the relations between the center and the periphery. And really and truly, I believe that there is an opportunity right now, maybe an unprecedented opportunity in world history, where the peripheries, let's call the middle powers peripheries, in many ways can detach themselves from their dependency to the big powers and start forming more relationships, economic relationships themselves. Also because the global supply chains and the ensuing trade tariffs in themselves give leverage that was until recently unprecedented. To me, it is exceptional that the main debate on brokering a peace deal is the procurement of raw minerals. That for me is quite exceptional, and I don't know whether it has ever happened in world history. It does also give the leverage in the sense that the dynamics are changing. Until 10, 15 years ago, we were experiencing offshoring of economic functions, with companies going very far away because it was economically more advantageous for them to do so. Now that model is transforming into what former Secretary Yellen described as friend shoring. You know, going to invest in countries that are more similar to you, even if they are not the most economically advantageous to you. Which I think is a very interesting development, which we will see more of in the next few years. Second point, and I will conclude very briefly, I do see this also as a big shift in modern history where, or at least the history of the last century, where we were used to see the big powers being the biggest advocates of free trade. Now, we're seeing the smaller powers advocating free trade, which is a very seismic shift in attitude and which shows the changes that globalization has brought to the world economic system. My third point is that smaller countries, be it we describe them smaller, be it economically or physically, most of the time thrive when they are innovators and explore new spaces. New spaces in the past century meant the seas, was the maritime industry, where small countries, small land countries are big ocean states at the end of the day. And we're seeing it in the past 2 decades or so, where it is the smaller countries that have taken the lead in the development of the digital sphere. because it did not necessitate the traditional infrastructure, and they were more nimble than the bigger countries in adapting to that. My last point, I was very, very intrigued by what Mr. President was saying on size and so on. It's a fascinating debate. And really and truly, we are seeing a situation where we don't know how to box countries, and maybe we should not box countries. Because can we classify a small island like Qatar as a medium state today? Can we classify Russia as a big power? In many ways, because to me, one of the most interesting economic statistics is that the economy of Russia is as big as the economy of California. So why is Russia considered big? It's because of other geopolitical reasons. And then we forget, and I end here, the smallest state in the world, which is not a small power, not even a big power, it's a divine power, the Vatican. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You know, very, very good points. I would not comment or even mention them, but you are so right. The international trade regime, as we knew it, it's changing, rapidly changing, and what are the adjustments that we need? Your reflection also on the importance of critical minerals, I think it's vital when we think about supply chains and what you call the friendly shoring, which is also called the near shoring, and how this geography is rapidly changing, and your call for the need of innovation and to experiment with new areas in the economy, especially for smaller countries. And again, how is that we classify countries? I think it's the big question for the panel. What is a big country? What is a small country? You know, at the UN, we call, the low income, the middle income countries, but it's not only about GDP, it's not only about square kilometers. So perhaps we need to be creative and categorize countries in different ways, again, using variable geometry indicators. So thank you for these comments. I'm sure that everybody would like to react to them. Unfortunately, we don't have time. Let me now call Artis Pabriks. He was the former defense minister of Latvia and former foreign minister. You have the floor, and of course, because of being a former Minister of Defense, the question to you is about the security concerns, the role of middle powers, the changing nature of conflict from cyber threats, hybrid warfare. Conflict is becoming more and more complex. So how can middle powers contribute to global and regional security without relying entirely on great power protection? So you have the floor. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Madam. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, it's my pleasure to be here in this forum. And as a first message, I have good news and the bad news. As far as the bad news, the emerging new world order, or passing away existing world order, still did not reach the bottom line. So it will be worse. The good news is that after a storm, there's always coming a calm weather. So earlier or later, they will emerge again, probably and hopefully, the rule-based order which will be upheld by all types of countries, either small, medium, or the large ones. And if I'm looking to the structure and politics between countries or people, what is the driving force behind our attempts to create a new world order? And I believe this was already defined by ancient Greeks 4,000 years ago. This is an attempt to find a just world and a just political system. We all want to live in justice, either in our families or in our countries or globally. So if politics are unjust, they try to change. Now, if you look to the smaller countries, and smaller countries just like middle countries, they have a natural wish, first of all, for justice, which can be enforced because they cannot always, especially the small ones, but in most of cases also middle-sized countries, rely on their sheer power, and they cannot live in a world where the might is right. And because of that, they are looking for justice through either international organizations, which create some kind of limits for the larger forces, and which creates alliances which can enforce the just peace, just life, just world order. And it also sometimes decreases the ability of the large powers, of superpowers in the world, to exercise their right as they wish, regardless of concepts, justice, but just because they want to do this, so they do this. So our natural concern for small and medium countries is we want that the big powers exercise their power with carefulness, and the world order is based on justice. Now, I would like to follow up to the Prime Minister of Malta, and I was also looking into the, for instance, latest information of International Monetary Fund, and I did not find among the first 10 countries such country as Russia. Economically, it is somewhere between 2.5% and 3.5% of world GDP. At the same time, I believe here, many of you will consider this as a superpower, large power. Why? Because they have nuclear bombs, like North Korea, Israel, Pakistan, some other country? Or because they have an ambition to be a superpower. Why does, for instance, our neighboring Russia, and sorry for bringing up this example, but I think it's important because this country at this moment is waging an unjust war against its neighboring country, Ukraine, unjust war. And it is willing to challenge the existing world order in order to become a superpower. And what is superpower in a Russian current understanding? It is a possibility to make deals among the lives and death of other countries and people without restrictions with other so-called superpowers. If I have to define now who is a superpower in the world, I see only two countries, which is United States and China. These are currently the big powers. Why do I define them like this? Because these are the only countries in the world which can, for instance, in these concrete circumstances, enforce the peace instead of that war which is going on now on the Ukrainian soil. If they want, they can do this. Our duty is to ensure, as a small powers and middle powers, that if somebody wants to enforce this peace, this is a just peace, not just a peace. Because only just peace can be sustainable, and it can bring also peace and prosperity to us, other countries, small, medium, and even the big ones. Because even the big countries, those two, they do not have the absolute power. Not because, as some of the political scientists were speaking, that absolute power brings absolute corruption. No, because also absolute power never really exists in the world. We always need alliances. And the small countries and medium countries are standing ready to join the alliances if the cause is just, if the new world order might be just, and if we can bring a prosperity and peace in a just way. And just one more last thing, also about our neighboring country, because sometimes even journalists, even seasoned analysts, they're frequently telling, look, you know, yes, but this NATO expansion and European expansion, they're threatening such country as Russia. But maybe somebody should once ask a question. Why all the neighboring countries, virtually, which are neighbors of Russia, are trying to join alliances like NATO and European Union? Because they have nowhere where to spend the money, because they have some other goals, or they are seeking alliances to invade Russia? I don't think so, that my country or neighboring countries, or even such countries as Finland and Sweden ever would join NATO to spend money and then plan to invade Russia. Not at all. We would be very happy if we could live in a peace, just peace, and the new world order, which is based on the rule of law, where either large countries, medium, or small ones respect it and live according to rules. And this is how I see the new world order in an emerging sense and in a way how it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pabriks. And, you know, your call for just peace and for the big powers to exercise their power responsibly. And I think we all want the same, to live in peace, free from fear and free from want. It's as easy as that. Well, it's easy to say, difficult to do, of course. So let me now close our panel with Nambaryn Enkhbayar, former president of Mongolia. Excellency, your country is a member of ASEAN, has done, you know, great strides in terms of development, in terms of, you know, it's a country, and here my 2 cents also, which are the powers? Your country is a power in terms of gender equality and the role of women, for example, and on sustainable development. So we see the power of middle powers, including your beautiful country, where I had the privilege to be, you know, a few months ago. So, Excellency, you have the floor. We will close the panel with you. You have the last word, because I'm told that we need to finish. So, last but not least, you have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you. Well, I'm grateful for the organizers to hold such a big forum, and it's very interesting for us to listen to different opinions and to different remarks. Mongolia is a small country, but since the organizers don't have a panel of small countries, I requested that I might join this middle power countries panel. So Mongolia is a small country, but with great history. And we are very proud of our history, and it's very much connected with Central Asia, with this part of the world. And many scholars and historians are studying what was actually so-called Pax Mongolica, a peaceful coexistence of different religions and cultures, free trade, simple tax system, good infrastructure for delivery and exchange of information, safe and secure land for travel. Yes, Mongolia is a small country surrounded by 2 big neighbors. This is the only country which is surrounded by 2 big neighbors like China and Russia. At the same time, we have a so-called third neighbor policy, which means that although we have 2 big natural neighbors, we want to build up good relations with all other countries, India, Europe, Northeast Asia, the United States of America, and Central Asia. Based on my experiences, I think that there are some lessons I think we can share here. Small countries like Mongolia cannot afford of living on its own, isolated. We have to be open. We have to be more active. We need friends and allies. Whereas big countries can afford being and existing on its own, they can exist without allies and without friends. The second observation would be small countries cannot afford being slow. We try to be fast because delay is death for small countries. Like they put in Latin, periculum in mora. Whereas big countries can afford being slow because time always plays on them. Today we witness time of big changes. It's happening especially in the relationships between Europe and the United States. Maybe we didn't notice all the differences the United States and Europe has got, but now the differences are quite clear. Europe is a culture of justification, of inaction, of consensus. Europe is a culture of being afraid of making a mistake, whereas the United States is the culture of action, culture of not being afraid of making a mistake, culture of decisions based on the majority. So in this sense, I would like to touch upon the activities of President Trump. He's a big reformer. I think in this sense, he can be compared with another big reformer. We used to have Mr. Gorbachev. I find striking similarities between Mr. President Trump's and Mr. Gorbachev's reforms. They both focus on changing the existing system, dismantling the established system. Gorbachev's perestroika was an attempt to make the Soviet Union great again. He didn't want to dismantle the Soviet Union. He wanted to make the Soviet Union great again. Trump's goal is to make America great again. Gorbachev tried to reform the established elite, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, with values connected with extreme left ideology. Whereas President Trump tries to reform the established elite, the so-called deep state, with values connected very deeply to woke ideology. Gorbachev withdrew from Eastern Europe. Trump is withdrawing now from Europe, mainly from Western Europe. Gorbachev withdrew from Warsaw Pact. President Trump might withdraw from the NATO. Gorbachev withdrew financial support from Eastern Bloc countries, including Mongolia at that time. Trump is trying to withdraw financial support from the European countries and putting tariffs as a part of this attempt. At the same time, there are also some differences, very clear ones. Gorbachev faced resistance at home and had support abroad, whereas President Trump has got big support at home and faces resistance abroad. So it's time for us, for small countries, to decide to be at the forefront of the reforms or to be in the tail of the reforms. We know that at any cost, it is very important for small countries to be at the forefront of the reforms. So I would like to use this opportunity and suggest two main kinds of reforms. One is connected with the reform of the United Nations. We have been discussing about the vetoing power. So vetoing power, doesn't the United Nations act actively and doesn't allow the United Nations to implement its decisions or even make up any decision. So maybe we can think about introducing a mechanism of overcoming the veto by 3/4 of the votes of the General Assembly. That would be still give a lot of power to countries with veto power. At the same time, the General Assembly will have enough power to address the difficult issues the United Nations faces to solve. The another point, which is quite old one, but I think it's important, is very clear today, is let's work together, small countries, middle power countries, to totally prohibit and eliminate nuclear power. That is the very important goal for middle and small countries. And finally, I would like to say that at all the reforms, at the center of all the reforms, there should be the human rights, the human lives. We have to stop killing. We have to make ceasefire at any cost, and then everything should be decided by negotiations, by knowing the interests of all sides, by trying to find solution. Otherwise, we cannot call for further arms supply to conflicting sides. We cannot support indirectly the killing of other people. So I think the role of small countries and medium-sized countries is work together in reforming the United Nations, and that will give us much more power to influence on the decisions of the United Nations, total prohibition and elimination of nuclear power, and putting the human right and human life at the center of any activities or any decisions governments are making in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I cannot think of a better way to close this panel in basically your 2 points. To reform the UN, I think it is much needed, urgent, on the areas you mentioned, and more than 20 years trying to reform the UN Security Council, and basically your call to give more power to the UN General Assembly. Perhaps the time is now, absolutely. And your call to the need of working together regardless of size, small, medium, and large countries, because at the end of the day, that we all want the same. Human rights, human dignity, and peace. So thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you to the incredible panel. I had follow-up questions for each one of you, but I understand that our time is up. Thank you for listening. Thank you to the amazing panelists. And I think we broke a record of 10 people in a panel at Forum. So, but that's why. Well, 10 people, amazing speakers. So thank you for that. A very enriching conversation. I'm sure that the audience agrees with me. So thank you, and enjoy lunch. Enjoy lunch.
One announcement. Actually, the best way is to reform the United Nations is finally to elect a woman to lead the United Nations. Oh. And for the lunch, who wants to attend the Middle East discussion, it's on the second floor. And who wants to attend the Ukraine discussion, it's on the first floor.